Today on Brush with Knowledge, we're talking with Kristin Rapp about the arts being a vehicle for healing. Join us. Hi, I'm Larry Moss, and I'd like to welcome you to Brush with Knowledge. Throughout this series, we're going to explore the role of teaching artistry as a tool to transform education and ignite your imagination. In each episode, we'll highlight the work of a different teaching artist and offer ideas that you can use in your own classrooms, meetings, and even the larger communities you serve and live in. Today, we're talking with Kristin Rapp, Executive Director of Flower City Arts Center, teaching artist, therapist, social entrepreneur, and advocate for community arts education. In this episode, we're going to explore the intersection of art, mental health, and healing. And, well, welcome, Kris. Thanks for coming here.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
So let's dive right into healing through art and arts education isn't something that most people wake up and decide to do.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about what got you to this point. Where was your start in the arts? I know your parents were involved in the arts. What was it that really got you moving in this direction?
Okay, well, there was the doodling on the wall when I was 3.
Hopefully
that was the first spanking I ever got.
I was hoping that has been preserved.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I was a natural artist, writing and illustrating little children's books when I was young and playing the flute, singing, local community theater and things like that. The arts are what got me through school pretty much. So I always kind of knew in high school I was voted most likely to be in the arts or something like that, the most artistic. And so I went to RIT for graphic design. And in my junior year, a couple of days in, I thought, nope, I don't think this is my path. I just felt like graphic design is part of who I am, I feel like. I think if you're an artist, it's just there all the time. But I felt like I needed to do something a little more humanities oriented. So I flipped over to SUNY Geneseo, went to school for psychology, and then got a degree in, I went to school for special ed and got a bachelor's in psychology. And then I got my master's in social work. So I took a little bit of a convoluted path.
and then back to the arts.
Yes, and then back to the arts.
Now, so as far as the arts, just to get this all out there, you talked about flute a little bit. You talked about singing. Were there more? So graphic arts, as creative as that can be, also that often has restrictions. There are rules.
Right.
So what else did you play with? Was music something that you pursued for a little bit, or was it?
Well, I'm always a singer at all times. I feel like that's just part of who I am. I love to dance. I feel like I kind of weave the arts into my life in a variety of ways. But the visual arts were kind of the primary form. And so I drew all the time and painted and things like that. So, and then kind of began to incorporate the arts into the healing work or the therapeutic work that I've done.
So talk a little bit about that. Healing can take on so many different forms, and there are so many reasons and needs on that. Where is your interest and focus?
Okay, well, I think driven by my own experiences with turmoil and pain and trauma and things like that, having suffered with some depression and anxiety, terrible panic attacks and things like that, kind of drove me to understand that better and to want to hear and be present for other people when they're struggling and going through things. So just listening is kind of what I thought. I think that's just being present for people is really powerful. So I took the route of social work and became a licensed master of social work and a therapist. And then move that in my life toward working with individuals, young people. A lot of my work has been with children and teenagers and families, keeping families together, working with kids in the foster care system, and then working with couples, because relationships have been a really important part of my life.
And what I find interesting, just as you were talking about the listening side of things, like the art, and most artists are creating and they're showing probably what's internal to them.
Yeah.
They're finding ways of expressing that, and you're looking for an audience. And you took the other side of it, kind of, having been there, having been on stages and been a creative, now listening to what other people want to share with you.
I feel like the healing arts is its own form of art. It's being just being really present with someone through their pain, through trauma, through what they've been through. And then, of course, I had a mentor one time, Sharon Farchione Ross, who said that expression is the opposite of depression. And I like to add in there, it's the opposite of oppression, repression, suppression. Expression is kind of in us. And as a social worker for a long time, at the beginning of my social work career, I didn't have the arts in my life, and I started to recognize and see it. So I was literally driving around in this little Honda Civic, and my car stereo had been stolen. And I realized that I had been driving around for probably 3 or 4 years without any music. And I love to sing. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'm depressed, And I was working with people who were depressed in depressed neighborhoods, and I started feeling really depressed. And that was what made me start to want to bring the arts back into my life. And that was what got me moving towards starting my own nonprofit, bringing the arts back into the social work. Being driven by wanting to make social change.
And allowing other people outlets of expression.
Absolutely. Yeah,
now,
100%.
So you have been connected with a number of nonprofits, some that you have started.
Yeah. Right.
So talk about the nonprofit work and what you have done, and even where you are currently working with running another arts nonprofit. Right.
I thought I was out and they pulled me back in, Larry. So as I mentioned, I kind of had this need as a social worker to want to provide opportunities, especially for young people. A lot of the things that we do to care for young people who are struggling are talk therapy and medication and things like that. And I was seeing that having limited impact. And I just wanted to see more and wanted to offer arenas where young people can express themselves, but also make it practical. So we started our flagship program for my former organization, Art Peace, was a creative entrepreneur program. In the practical sense, they were learning they were learning life skills and workforce development through starting businesses, sort of an apprenticeship model, working with master teaching artists who are business people. Teaching artists are people who, make a business of their arts. And so our young people were working together with these artists and forming businesses, writing business plans and learning about financial literacy and marketing their business and rolling it out, and learning a lot of skills along the way. And then we started doing arts integration in schools. So that's our marrying with your path, the teaching arts path.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so today, as the head of a larger arts organization that's been around for a long time, you're, rather than going out into the community, it's more hosting classes but still that educational piece and
Right.
do you see, same thing. I mean, you're allowing people an opportunity to express themselves. Is this still also tied in with the social work and or totally separate?
Such a great question. I mean, I feel like you'll understand this. When you work with artists, it's really great to be a therapist too. No offense to anyone, but artists tend toward being sensitive people, emotional people, expressive people, passionate people. So having the background in the therapeutic realm is always helpful. But also, I believe that the arts are naturally therapeutic. So at the foundation of everything, at the underpinning of probably every program I've ever designed, every kind of arts project, the underlying it all is the desire for people to get to know themselves better and to heal. I mean, I really do believe that they're naturally healing. So even if it's someone who during COVID decided they needed to get their hands in some clay, and really got into pottery at Flower City Art Center or something like that, which was the biggest, most burgeoning area at Flower City for some reason after the pandemic and, as things have been moving along. I think it just feels good, and it's kinesthetic and you get your hands dirty,
So I talk a lot on this podcast about the story that every artist has.
Yeah.
The story they want to tell or stories in the education realm. And what is is there a story that you're trying to tell, a theme that you keep coming back to?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reason that people might be happy when they're maybe getting therapy or in a meeting or doing something creative with us, it has to do with seeing who they are and accepting them for who they are and making sure that kind of love is at the center of everything. My private practice is called Lovebird, and I really do believe that we're here to love and be loved. So I do try to have that be at the center of everything that I do. So I would say that's part of the story.
So what can we do to heal community needs, and what other community things do you see that could stand that healing touch?
I feel like that's the more important question of what we do, and I really do strive to stay mission driven in the work. I mean, art for art's sake is valuable. We know that, just expressing and just making something for yourself has value. So we offer opportunities for that at Flower City Art Center. We have studios and people come and rent space and they take classes and they make. But we also have programs like Studio 678 for middle school students from the city who have an opportunity to see their community and take photographs of it and learn how to write and express themselves in literary ways. They create a book and they exhibit in many local galleries, and it changes their lives. We have one young man who now is the youngest member of the school board in Rochester, and he's an alumni of that program. So we know that the arts can transform lives, and we've seen that in kind of a variety of different ways. And those are the kinds of mission-driven programs that we want to do more of. We have a veterans program that we're working on right now. And we have a program called Art Ventures, which is an entrepreneurial program in the printmaking and book arts that we just piloted. So those are the kinds of things we're moving toward. Last year, we had a pilot program for 8 high school young people in our ceramics department. Now it's building, and it's going to be 29 young people this summer. So those we know, those can really be impactful. And we also know that you can make an impact in the world by expressing. So things like social justice movements can be impacted by people coming into our printmaking department and taking a statement and making a poster and plastering it all over the community because they care about, some social action. And we definitely have a lot of activists in our community at Flower City Arts Center. So that's definitely a way that people are also having their voice heard.
So what would be a next step for building an arts-focused community?
Ooh, I didn't see that one coming. A next step?
Or a first step. I don't know. I mean, what do we need?
You mean in the city of Rochester or in our community?
Our community is great, but just in general, as you're talking about this, the healing and the community building and all of that, I know, there's a need for more community resources for art. And we need more opportunities for art to be used in front of, with everybody and to give people a chance to create.
Yeah.
Where, you're running an art center, which I know has limited space and limited ability to expand and do more.
Right.
What else would be a way to see this happening at a greater level throughout our community or others?
Wow, good question. I think about that a lot, actually, and carry around a vision, that I feel like I've been carrying around for years that just keeps building and evolving. And I feel like people like us, Larry, we should come together, and collaborate and partner in genuine ways. I think that always sounds good, right? It's very difficult to come together and collaborate and share space and share resources. But I think we almost don't have a choice about that, We worry about our leadership. We worry about the government. We worry about where the world is going. And there's so many things left and right, especially in the arts community. We know that people are struggling to make a living. I mean, sometimes it's hard for us to get our work done every day because people don't have transportation to get to work or can't afford health care. Or can't pay their rent, literally. And we can't pay huge salaries and things like that. So there's a multitude of issues that we see right on our doorstep on Monroe Ave, and in our neighborhood, right? And also just, these practical needs. So I think there are ways that if we put our minds together, our creative minds together, to make the arts, but also things that are practical. The creative sector is huge. It's a large portion of our population and our economy, and so it would be great to see more companies wanting to partner and wanting to come together to build something bigger. A place for creative entrepreneurship and for learning in creative ways. We know the power. You and I know the power of arts integration or arts and technology integration, and how schools and learning can be transformed by that type of education. So what about creating something bigger? And like you said, we're definitely outgrowing our space. We're hunting around for bigger space and new opportunities, lots of ideas. Lots of ideas.
Yeah, so just hitting on some of them, as somebody running a smaller arts organization, I actually love the idea of partnering more and sharing resources, and because we all can grow together if we can figure out how to do that. And I guess I've wondered, as I've been trying to do this over the last few years, is figure out why is it so hard to make this happen as a group, because I see your vision and so want to be part of that and want to see that grow, and that, the creative campus, that we can all share resources together and be in this fight together and continue promoting teaching artistry as something that can help everybody. And you mentioned in there, with some of the problems is people not being able to pay for healthcare. Mm-hmm. And here we are asking for funding for the arts when we need to be funding healthcare. And really the two of us, I think, see this the same way. We need to be funding both, with the arts being part of, again, that whole healing thing that we started out talking about. Right. But I think one of the challenges that we run into is people that go, why are you asking for money for the arts when we can't pay for this? And we can't. And I think it's because arts needs to be integrated into everything we do.
It's a vehicle to teach content areas, in academically. We know that works. We know that works. I designed an arts and technology integrated school program few years back, and it had amazing results, really promising results. And funding probably was the only barrier. But if you could imagine engaging students like that all day long, every day, that's a way to transform education. And that is, an economic engine right there, education. But then even further, if you're talking about entrepreneurship, business ownership, apprenticeship models where young people are literally learning trades. We don't even have a program like that in the city. Young people who go to the city schools, they don't have something like a BOCES or something where they can learn trades to the extent that, some of the suburban schools do. So there are a lot of ways to make it very practical and to create a population of young people who are ready for the workforce, and really trained and prepared for the workforce. The arts do not have to be separated from that,
No. And so I want to step back for 1 second. You mentioned BOCES, and it occurs to me that I don't know who's listening to this to this podcast. Anybody in New York State, except for outside of the three major, three largest cities in the state, are going to be familiar with BOCES, but anybody further out is not. And BOCES is that Board of Cooperative Educational Services. So across New York State, it is all about shared resources between schools and school districts, and that offering of those extra programs that can't necessarily be offered in every individual school. Right. So yes, it's a wonderful thing that New York State has, and I don't know what the equivalent would be in other states. I'm sure some have something, but yeah, the biggest cities in the state are not part of the whole BOCES program. So yeah, those kids growing up in the city, and that's not to put down the education that they're getting, they're just cut out of one substantial thing that yes. So I know both of us have that goal of bringing some of these more interesting programs back into the city schools, and integrating arts. You have worked extensively with the city schools in some of your roles.
Yes.
What's something that you would do today if you could, if you had the power to, the funding, the access? I know it would be great if we could continue to send teaching artists into schools. A personal project of mine that I've wanted to, we've done some work on is getting a theater program into some of the schools that don't have it.
Yeah. Wow. I would say expansive arts integration, and really, it's not that every young person is going to be an artist or is interested in the arts. That's not why I say that. It's that we know naturally that the arts engage. We know that young people are going to be interested and engaged by the wide array of different things that are offered. Music is a universal language. Most young people are going to be connected to some type of music, for example. But we can teach throughout the academics that way, but we can also teach a whole variety of other things. And the arts help content areas that teachers have trouble teaching. And it lives inside of them in an entirely new way when it's taught through the arts. If you dance the Revolutionary War in full costume, that is going to live with you forever, that experience. You will never forget that content.
Schoolhouse rocks.
Yeah.
Schoolhouse rock. Yes.
Exactly. I've seen that in living color over and over, the power of that. So if I could do anything, it would be to make education more meaningful and real and tailored to individual students based on what they love, based on what they really like to do, and reaching young people in that way. And it might not be through the arts. It could be a different vehicle, but we have to look at what is really engaging them, and use that to our benefit. It's not that they're not interested. It's not that they're not curious. They're curious in an array of different things, but maybe just not what, the kind of typical factory model schooling that we've been feeding them for over and over for many, many years,
So do you have anything that you can share that somebody can take from this program and learn from and go and try in their own classroom or their own whatever setting, even a business setting or...
I was thinking about that, and I really appreciate all of your questions. Actually, it really got me thinking in creative ways. But the art of the question was what I came up with when I was thinking about that concept of what to give people to carry with them. I really think that questions are powerful. I love this book, The True and the Questions by Sabrina Ward Harrison. And I was just looking at that before coming here today. But I feel like we are lifelong learners. So this is going to be useful and helpful for young people and also for adults. I think asking really compelling questions, staying curious, addressing wonder, and this is for anyone at any age, just like I feel children's books are accessible to anyone at any age. I like doing things, say, for my team at Flower City Arts Center. One time, not long ago, I had them bring in an artifact from their childhood, a photo maybe of them, a memory, a story, or an object of some sort, and had them tell a story about where they're from, and just really, we all listened to each other tell stories about where we're from. And I think I am from poems are really powerful. A lot of teaching artists use those, and a lot of English teachers probably too. But it's simple. You're asking to remember a color, to remember, maybe your grandmother's kitchen, a neighborhood, things like that. But what you're really doing is you're caring about where people come from and who they actually are. And you're trying to get to know them at that level. And that's meaningful. And it helps people know that they are really loved and considered and important,
Now, you have worked in a lot of different settings and done a lot of different things. What have you done in your career that you're most proud of?
I am most proud of the work that I did at Art Piece, where we were training young people to be creative thinkers and critical thinkers.
Have you been able to follow any of those kids that you trained in Art Piece?
Yeah.
So
that's exactly where I was going. That was exactly where I was going.
So talk about that, the successes and what you've seen from there.
Tomorrow night, I'm going to the Lilac Festival to see Danielle Ponder, and I knew her in the field of working with young people in Rochester. But a young man is opening for her. His name is Shy the Realist. He's a rapper. He was a slam poet, rapper, actor in our programs when he was a teenager. And now he's traveling around the country, touring with his music and getting amazing opportunities. He hasn't made it totally yet, in the bigger sense, but he's on his way. And I just couldn't be more proud. I definitely feel like a proud mama for some of these young ones. And people will stop me sometimes in Wegmans or a corner store or something like that and tell me they know my name and they'll remember, learning something from the Creative Entrepreneur Program or from some of our after school programs or something in a school. And that has the most value to me. But there are definitely young entrepreneurs in this community making a difference and, running businesses and impacting our community in positive ways, some of them working with young people and going the teaching route. And I am just filled with pride and just humbled by, the work that they're doing.
What have you learned that you have not yet done that you would like to?
Oh, things that I would like to do?
Yeah, in this space.
Oh, all right. Well, the bigger vision. This is definitely a much bigger vision for the community.
Let's pretend that check exists that could cover it.
Oh, wow. I'd love to get into that creative visualization place. That's my favorite place to be when I meditate. But yeah, I think being able to impact more and just really being able to impact more people through creative entrepreneurship, through opportunities, through creative expression. And I just think there's so many possibilities there to be, a hub to see business incubate and grow, and also just for people to become more of who they are. And there's so many opportunities, also for healing in the community too. And it's needed. That's really needed. And I definitely have a few books in me that I would love to write and get out there. So there's definitely some passion projects of my own that I want to do too.
There's the creative campus that we were talking about earlier. That would be fun if there was a way to bring all of the creative arts organizations together.
Yep.
Into a space. Mm-hmm. Let's take this back to what this podcast is all about, teaching artistry.
Yeah.
This is a space, you were a teaching artist. You worked in the office of a teaching artist organization. Mm. What have you seen in the profession that you'd like to talk about, to change, to bring back?
Well, when it's interesting because I grew up in a family of educators and they were in community theater and in a folk band and things like that. And I can tell you how I knew, and looking back, this definitely influenced me, how I know that the teaching arts works. My father was my principal from the time I was in kindergarten to sixth grade. And when people remember his work as their principal, they always bring up the fact that he came into the cafeteria at lunchtime and sang funny songs on Fridays and made them laugh and made them sing along and things like that. That is the one thing they always bring up to me. And I just think that's so interesting because there's so many other more serious things that he did in the realm of literacy and leadership and things like that. So the teaching arts definitely had, an impact on me before I even really realized that it did. And I definitely, when I found a state conference of people gathering from all over the state, of teaching artists coming together and sharing what they do, I thought that I was in the colorized version of Oz all of a sudden from the black and white. I had butterflies in my stomach, and I thought, I didn't even know this existed. This is amazing, So it just really had an impact on me. And I thought, well, I grew up around educators, and when I was young, I obviously loved the arts, but I also, would write and draw on the chalkboard in the basement of my house, and dream about being a teacher too. So I think there was a way to kind of bring those things together for me. But then I've just seen the impact of it.
Okay, well, you mentioned your dad. Who else were the major influences then that brought you to teaching artistry or arts or healing or any of that? I mean, there have to have been more people. So like you mentioned as a principal coming into the cafeteria and singing. I remember a principal in elementary school that was a ventriloquist, and he'd walk around with his dummy, and I got to tell you, I enjoyed listening to him far more than I enjoyed listening to the dummy, far more than I enjoyed listening to the principal.
Right.
So yes, there are all sorts of ways of using the arts to get a message out. In the case of Mr. Harmon, it was talk through the dummy.
My parents were wise enough to see that I was interested in the arts, and they needed to harness that if they could. And I come from a small town, and we didn't have a thriving arts department. So they hired Mrs. Wetteraw, Nancy Wetteraw, who was my private art teacher. And she just took me, out in nature and kind of showed me the world in a different light. And, taught me that there's actually purple and different colors in clouds. And I just didn't know that and didn't see it that way before. So I think we all have arts influencers or mentors or teachers along the way. And then, of course, when I came into the field of teaching arts and discovered that this was actually a thing that people did in their life, and I knew I needed to be a part of it somehow. There were plenty of people, like Glenn McClure is probably one of the first ones, and Ted Canning and other teaching artists that I ran across that got me really inspired to think about how this could be a deep, rich, meaningful way of engaging young people. Yeah.
What do you think is missing from allowing teaching arts to become a bigger, more recognized thing?
Support. Understanding. I don't know about you, but I get tired sometimes of being a constant advocate for the validity of the arts. I mean, there is so much piles and piles of research that supports teaching arts and supports the arts as a vehicle for change and for business and for leadership and creative thinking. So why do we not see it as valid? Why do we keep having to kind of tell that story?
So an understanding of what we do, an understanding of what can be done through the arts. And when you first said support, I thought you meant funding, because that's the other one.
That too.
All of those artists that you mentioned, conversations that we've all had over the years of, well, here's a program I want to do. How do I get there? And that's been a very big challenge for a lot of us. We've talked on this podcast in the past about funding, how to find funding, how to, and that's a challenge, because a lot of the artists, even the ones that they could be really great in their art discipline, they can be really great in the education world. Everybody falls short somewhere, and for a lot of them, it's that funding and it's that asking for support that has been a challenge.
Yeah, and somehow in our culture, we think it's okay to ask artists to do things for free. I don't feel like we do that in most other professions, but for some reason, we always think it's okay, and we have that image of the starving artist, and we've kind of held that up for a really long time, that idea.
I think a piece of it is probably that the artists, you were talking about everything coming from love, and you have these artists that want to share that love.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for a lot of artists to say, no, I can't. So
Right. But we don't ask a lawyer usually, or a doctor, or an accountant, or, a myriad of other professions to do what they do for free. Maybe they give some pro bono work, of course, but I'm a firm believer in paying artists for what they do.
Absolutely. All right. Well, it has been wonderful talking to you. I really appreciate you coming in and doing this.
You too.
And I look forward to whatever projects we can manage to do together in the future.
Me too. Definitely. Thanks, Larry.
To learn more about everyone on our program, follow the links in the show notes and at brushwithknowledge.com. This podcast has been launched with funding from Genesee Valley Council on the Arts and the New York State Council on the Arts. Recording has been done at Rockvox Recording and Production. To learn how you can help support the creation of future episodes, please follow links in the show notes or visit brushwithknowledge.com.